with you all. My name is Corey Helfand. I'm the new rabbi at Or Kodesh in Chevy Chase.
Yeah.
I just started about 7 months ago. I relocated from the Bay Area just south of San Francisco, where I was there for 10 years after graduating from school in New York. And I'm here with my family. My wife Jenny is a social worker, and we have 3 children. Eden is 11, Matan is 9, Jonah is 6, and we have a puppy named Neshi. She's a Cavapoo. It's short for Nishika. Anyone know what Nishika means in Hebrew?
No, what is that?
Means kiss. So she loves to give kisses.
Oh, kisses.
Kisses, that's right.
I thought you said sis.
And no, not as far as I'm aware. So it's great to be with you. How's the learning been going each week?
Good.
Yeah? Just okay? Yeah, tell me what you've learned so far.
Oh my God. You want to start from birth or from when I was?
No, during this class that you have on Wednesdays. What topics have you talked about?
The Jewish holidays that are not well known.
Jewish holidays that are not well known.
Oh.
Does anyone know a Jewish holiday that's not well known that was yesterday? Steve?
Valentine's Day.
Oh, what Jewish holiday?
Valentine's Day.
What's the Jewish equivalent of Valentine's Day?
Wow.
Tu B'Av, that's right, the 15th of Av, but that happens in the summer after the destruction. Yesterday was a little known holiday known as Purim Katan.
What is that?
What is that? Anyone know?
Pre-Purim?
It's kind of like a pre-Purim. Purim Katan, which means little Purim, only happens during a leap year, of which we are in right now, because we have 2 months of Adar. We have Adar Rishon, the first month of Adar, and we have Adar Sheni, the second month of Adar. Why do we have 2 months of Adar? It's a leap year, that's right. And why do we need to have an extra month? What's the purpose that it serves?
Fill in.
Say it again?
To fill in.
Well, it's more than to fill in. Yeah,
To keep the
Sure.
holidays in the right part of the year.
that's right. We want to keep the holidays in the right part of the year. It's a fancy word. It's called intercalation. We want to make sure to reset the calendar because Passover has to fall when? In the springtime. Otherwise, Passover would float. Passover might fall in the summer, or it could fall in the fall. You could be having Rosh Hashanah during Passover or Passover during Rosh Hashanah. We wouldn't know what to do. We would sit at the table thinking we're going to eat honey cake, and all of a sudden there'd be matzah. It would be a shanda, the likes of which nobody's ever heard before. So yesterday was a mini holiday called Purim Katan because it's 1 month before Purim. So yesterday would have been Purim. There's actually another small holiday 1 month after Passover. Does anyone know what that holiday is called?
Also.
Not Purim. Go ahead, Steve.
Pesach Sheni.
It's Pesach Sheni. It's the second Passover. Why do we need a second Passover? That's right. We want to make you clean your kitchens 1 more time. But that's not the reason. It's in case you missed the ability to have or partake in the Passover offering thousands of years ago. They gave you an extra chance. 1 month later, anyone who had not been part of the community or had been outside the camp, they were able to then participate in the Passover Seder. So yesterday, anyone know what the requirements are on Purim Katan, on the mini Purim? Anyone know? Are you supposed to listen to the Megillah?
The Gods and Megillah.
No, not the Gans Megillah. The Katan Megillah. No. The only requirement on Purim Katan is to have a little bit of extra joy. To have an extra feast at your meal. Do something a little bit festive, a little bit joyful. So hopefully you all had something interesting or tasty to eat yesterday beyond the normal. So what we're going to do together today is we're going to study a story. It's a story from the Talmud. Anyone know when approximately the Talmud was written, the Babylonian Talmud?
Good boy. No.
The Talmud was probably compiled sometime between the 3rd and the 7th centuries of the Common Era. And in particular, this story that we're going to read is probably a story that took place before the Talmud was compiled. Some of you may have heard this story before in connection to Lag BaOmer. Anyone know what Lag BaOmer is? Go ahead, Ruth. When's Lag BaOmer? It's the 33rd day of
33rd.
33rd day of the counting between Passover and Shavuot during that Omer period. The Omer. And during that period of counting, there was said to be a lot of sadness on the Jewish calendar. It was a time of mourning. Even today, we don't get married, people don't get haircuts, they don't do other things that make them feel happy because it was a sad time. It was a time of destruction. And in particular, what major milestone or event happened, tragic event happened on the calendar in 70 of the Common Era? That's right, it was when the second temple was destroyed. Who destroyed it? The Romans. Who destroyed the first temple? The Babylonians. The Babylonians destroyed the first temple. The Persians said, come on back, rebuild the second temple. Then we have the story with the Greeks. Then we have the Romans come to power. The Romans destroyed the second temple. And then many of the people who were living in Israel were exiled. There was one last fight, one last battle that took place between 132 and 136 of the Common Era. It was one last attempt to try to defeat the Romans. Anyone know what that battle was called? Right, Ruth was right. It's the Bar Kokhba revolt. Bar Kokhba, what did he want to do? What's that? Well, he kind of did want to be Mashiach, that's right. And he thought that he was so powerful that he would be able to take down the Romans and the Hadrianic Empire. Did he succeed? He did not succeed. They got squashed. Sometime between the fall of Bar Kokhba and his people and 200 of the Common Era, one of the most important books of Jewish tradition, of law, was written down and codified. Anyone know what that was called? The Mishnah. It's okay, Ruth, you can say it nice enough. Right? The Mishnah. What's the Mishnah? Anyone know what the Mishnah is? It was said that when Moses was up on the mountain, Moses got two kinds of law. What were they? The written and the oral, right? The written should be ktav and the oral should be al-peh. The written stuff was written down at that moment, and the oral stuff was passed down from generation to generation and was eventually written down in 200 of the Common Era by Rabbi Judah the Prince, Yehuda HaNasi, in a book called the Mishnah. And the Mishnah had 6 parts to it. And each part corresponded with different aspects of our daily lives. Something about holidays, about sacred times, about getting married, about getting divorced, about damages, about criminal and civil law, all kinds of different things. So this story that we're going to read probably took place sometime between the Bar Kokhba revolt and the time that the Mishnah was written down. Would you like that text? You have one, okay. I want to read this story through 2 lenses. One lens is, what were the people experiencing in their historical context? But the other is, 2 years ago on Purim, what happened?
2 years.
How many years?
2 years ago on Purim, 1 month from now, what happened? COVID.
I was going to.
That's when our world shut down 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years next month on Purim,
Oh, right. 19.
right? It was March of 2020.
Right.
Many of us actually got to celebrate Purim one last time. We made the joke about having to wear masks for the first time. And then around the weekend, right after Purim, everyone shut down. Everybody had to go inside. What was it like here during the first months of COVID? What's that?
I wasn't here.
You weren't here.
I wasn't here either.
It was tough. Why was it tough?
No activities.
No activities.
10 people maximum.
Right, you had limits about how many people could be together. Were you allowed to eat together?
No,
No. Were you allowed to visit with each other?
no,
You were probably isolated in your rooms, right? Were you allowed to see your families?
no.
Right? You were completely shut off from the world. This is a story about what it looks like to be completely shut off from the world. And as we read the story, I want to see if there's any lessons that we can draw from this text that was written 2,000 years ago to what it's like to emerge from COVID today. Because even though we have emerged from what it was in March, April, May, June of 2020, we still have these waves with COVID, right? The Delta variant, the Omicron variant, who knows what the next variant is. Times when we can do more things and when we can do less things. Okay, so here's the story. The story starts as follows. I'm on the first page where it says Shabbat 33b. This is from the tractate of the Talmud that deals with Shabbat.
Oh, yeah.
Do you need an extra copy? Oh, okay.
You see it?
So the Gemara tells a story about an incident that took place when Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon were sitting, and Yehuda, son of converts, sat beside them. So before we go any further, we got these three people, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, and then a person named Yehuda, son of converts. So what do you think we know about the four people who were together?
One wasn't Jewish.
One may not have been Jewish. If he's the son of converts, what could that mean? He wasn't born Jewish, or his
He wasn't,
parents
right.
were not born Jewish, in which case they became Jewish, but he still retains the title of being the son of a convert. Is that a positive thing or a negative thing?
Negative.
It's a negative thing. What else do we know about Yehuda, the son of converts? What does he not have?
Was he circumcised?
I'm sure he was circumcised. I didn't check, but I think he was.
Title.
He doesn't have a title. He's not a rabbi. However, who is he sitting with?
Rabbi.
He's sitting with rabbis. So on some level, we have a person who's being differentiated because he's the son of people who converted, and he doesn't have the title of rabbi. However, he was invited to sit with the rabbis.
Yeah.
He got to sit at the big boys table. Okay? So here's the story. Rabbi Yehuda opened and said, "How pleasant are the actions of this nation, the Romans, as they established marketplaces and bridges and bathhouses." And Rabbi Yossi was silent. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai responded and said, "Everything that they established for their own purposes. They established marketplaces to place prostitutes in them, and bathhouses to pamper themselves, and bridges to collect taxes from all who pass over them." So we now know that the Romans did a bunch of stuff. What did the Romans do to the city?
Massacred.
What's that?
Massacred.
They did massacre the city, but after the massacre of the city, years later, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, what did the Romans do?
Enslaved.
They built it up.
Bathhouses.
That's right. They made bathhouses and bridges and marketplaces. They invested in infrastructure. Right? They did the Build Back Rome version in Jerusalem of whatever they say that they're going to do here in America. They made it nice and pretty.
Oh.
After the massacre, they said, "You know what? Let's make it a little Roman." Who here has been to Jerusalem?
What?
Who here has been to Jerusalem? Anyone here been to Jerusalem? If you walk through Jerusalem into the ancient ruins and you pictured what the marketplaces look like, could you imagine them being kind of trashy or beautiful and grand?
Trashy. Right.
Beautiful and grand, right? They were really ornate and exquisite. People were so proud to come and visit this particular place that had been built up by the Romans. But each of these three people have a different response. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Wow, they're so pleasant. They're beautiful, na'im." Rabbi Yossi is silent, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says the following: "They didn't do it for us. They did it for themselves. It wasn't about making us feel good. They did it for all kinds of inappropriate things, for prostitutes, for pampering, and for collecting taxes."
Right.
So according to Rabbi Yehuda, why does he think it's so beautiful?
I don't know.
It was. He's just reflecting, wow, it's really nice. It's good to be in this place. How beautiful it is. Why is Rabbi Yossi silent? Say it louder.
I was gonna ask that question. Why was he silent?
It's a good question. Why do you think Rabbi Yossi is silent?
Doesn't agree with them?
Maybe he doesn't agree with them. Or maybe he's afraid to speak out and share his opinion. right? If the Romans are in power, maybe speaking out is actually not such a good thing. Because if he speaks out, what might happen to him? He could get arrested, he could get killed, who knows? The Romans were not so nice to the Jews. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is publicly critical of the Romans. He's publicly critical of them. Why? Why would Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is said to be one of the early founders of Jewish mysticism, why is he so critical publicly of the Romans?
Was he afraid that they were going to have influence over?
Yeah, perhaps there is a real fear of influence. If the Romans make the city nice and beautiful, what will everybody else think?
They want to follow.
They want to be Roman. It's good to be Roman. Do we want that? No, there's another fear here. If they become Roman, what do they leave behind? Their Judaism. This is not dissimilar from the story of Hanukkah. In the story of Hanukkah, who were the people that the Jews are fighting against? The Greeks. And the Greeks, what did they do to the Jews? They Greekified them. That's a made-up word, I made that up. They Hellenized them. They made them Greek. They made them assimilate into the rest of society. And so there's this fear that now that there's no temple, now that the Romans are in power, that, oh my gosh, look what they did. They made it so nice. They built a 5-star hotel with a casino and a spa and all of these different things, a beautiful place where they can go get 24-hour room service. Of course, they're going to want to become Roman. Shimon Bar Yochai is skeptical. And Rabbi Yossi doesn't know what to say, because he's worried if he agrees with one or agrees with the other, or if he speaks his mind, that maybe the Romans are going to come out together. I'm just curious. Has anyone here over the last 2 years heard anybody express differing opinions around whether or not we should have masks or no masks, whether we should quarantine or not quarantine, whether it's 3 feet or 6 feet? Has anyone heard any of that dissection? And when you state an opinion that is different from your own or from somebody else's, what happens?
They say you're wrong.
Yes, they say you're wrong. Not only do they say that you're wrong, they don't want anything to do with you. For 4 years in America, from 2016 to 2020, independent of your politics, if you expressed a political opinion different from somebody else, what was the reaction?
That's what Trump did.
They blamed you, they blamed the candidate, they blamed this person, they blamed whatever. If you were to say that aloud, you'd get skewered. And if you did, you risked ruining a relationship. And some people chose to be silent. I don't know that this story is all that different today than it was 2,000 years ago. Yehuda, the son of converts, went and related their statements to his household. And those statements continued to spread until they were heard by the monarchy. Uh-oh, somebody posted it on Facebook. And it got back to the head of the monarchy, to the head of the Roman regime, that so-and-so went public with their opinion of being critical against the Roman buildings. So what happens once it gets posted on social media? Everybody knows about it. That's exactly right. It goes viral. Okay, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai became an overnight YouTube sensation. And interestingly, who's the person who spread the news? It's Yehuda, the son of converts. Well, what's the problem with that? Why does it matter that Yehuda, the son of converts, is the one who spreads the rumor?
They don't think he's Jewish enough?
Well, he's choosing sides. If he was already a convert and labeled as being an outsider, even though he's not a rabbi, even though he wasn't born Jewish, and now he decides, you know what, I'm going to take sides with the Romans? Well, what are you going to say?
Could you face us, please?
Sure, I'm trying to face everybody. But I will do my best. It's also hard with a mask. They just made me start wearing this mask for the first time in 2 years. I didn't even know it was a thing.
What?
I'm just kidding.
I know.
They ruled and said, Yehuda, who elevated the Roman regime, shall be elevated and appointed head of the sages. Yehuda, the son of converts, gets a promotion. He did a good thing. He's safe.
Yeah.
Shimon bar Yochai, on the other hand, maybe not so much. And Yossi, who remained silent, he didn't express an opinion, he's going to be exiled. Right? You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So because he said nothing, he gets in trouble. And he gets sent to the city on the top of the second page of Tzipori in the Galilee. And Shimon, who denounced the government, Shimon ben Yochai, who denounced the government, was sentenced to be killed. That's what you get for criticizing the government, or criticizing the Romans. You say an opinion, and you either get kicked out of the community, or you get sentenced to be killed. Can anyone think of a society today where you might be kicked out of a community for saying something against the government, or might be killed for saying something against the government? You can kick any number of them. And in our country, if you say something against the government, what happens?
Nothing.
Sometimes nothing.
Investigation.
Sometimes investigation. Sometimes you get kicked out of your own community.
Sometimes what?
You get kicked out of your own community. People feel, or they remove themselves from their own community. I can't be in a community like this because so-and-so believes this. How many stories have you heard over the last few years? Families have split apart because they can't even express a difference of opinion. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar went and they hid in the study hall. And every day Rabbi Shimon's wife would bring them bread, a jug of water, and they would eat. And when the decree intensified, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, women are easily impressionable, and therefore there is room for concern lest the authorities torture her and she reveals our whereabouts. And we're going to break this down a little bit because there's definitely a gender piece here. Why do they go to the study hall? In this case, the Beit Midrash. Why would Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Eliezer seek refuge in the study hall?
Were there a lot of books in there?
Yes, so if there were a lot of books in there, what might they find?
Answers.
Answers, wisdom, right? We are the people of the book. Or in the 21st century, the people of the Nook. Or the iPad, you pick which one you want. So they might go there to study, to find answers, to figure out what to do. When we don't know what to do, we open our tradition and we read and we learn until we figure out the answers. Why else might they go to the Beit Midrash, the house of study? Great, it was a place where community gathered. They wouldn't be alone. They would be with other people who were familiar to them. Why else would we go to the house of study? To study. And there's a big one.
Meat.
So what?
Meat.
Is that M-E-E-T or M-E-A-T?
To meat.
Oh, to meet people. Okay. The big one though is God. If they went to the house of study, that meant that maybe God was in that place. In a place that had been destroyed, where God's home, the temple, had been destroyed, they went to the next closest thing that they could find where God's presence might be. They went to a place of study. And during that time, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's wife was gracious to them. She brought them things. She snuck food in so that they could be sustained. But Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says to his son Rabbi Elazar, women are easily impressionable. We're worried that she might get tortured if she reveals our whereabouts. What do you think Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is saying about his wife? She's weak. That's not very nice.
Oh.
It's very typical. Yes. Why is it typical?
Because that world was gendered.
Yes, the world was gendered, and the role of the men and the role of the women were very different in that time. The men studied and they learned, and where did the women stay? In the home. So there's a real fear here. But maybe there's something else going on here. Why else might they be worried about her being impressionable?
About what?
Her being impressionable.
Just the fact that she'd be tortured.
Yes.
They want to say-
Maybe this is actually coming from a place of kindness. Even though there were gender roles of the ancient world, maybe what we're actually seeing here is, I don't want my loved one, my wife, to be tortured. I mean, they want to kill me. So if they're going to kill me, they'll do anything they possibly can to fulfill that decree. Interestingly enough, in a month from now, when we read the story of Purim, Esther, our heroine, she doesn't want to reveal herself either. What is Esther afraid of in the story of Esther? In the Megillah?
Being tortured.
Why is she afraid of being tortured or killed?
Oh, she's Jewish.
Because she's Jewish, right? In this case, we also have a story about two people who are Jewish, who are being threatened to be killed because of their Jewish identity, because they spoke out against the empire that destroyed, that massacred their people, that destroyed their temple. These stories kind of repeat themselves over and over again.
Yeah.
So what did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar do? They went and they hid in a cave. Because that's what you do in the ancient world. You go and you hide in the cave. And while they were in the cave, a miracle occurred there. There was a carob tree created for them with a spring of water. They would remove their clothes and they would sit covered in the sand up to their necks. They would study Torah all day in that manner. And at the time of prayer, they would dress and cover themselves and pray and then remove their clothes afterward so that they would not become tattered. And they sat in the cave for 12 years. Why did they go into a cave?
Not to be found.
Yes, they didn't want to be found. They were playing a massive game of hide and seek. They were hiding. And inside the cave, what sustains them? Study and a tree, but not any tree. What kind of tree? A carob tree. What do we know about carob trees? They're very strong.
The chocolate is made from carob.
Yeah, so there's lots of different kinds of food or sustenance that can come from the carob. What else? Anyone know the story about Tony the circle maker? He talked about, he would see someone who was planting a carob tree. And Tony the circle maker would say he would draw circles and he would stand in the circle and he would pray for rain. And he had this magic power to get the rain to fall down in that moment. But he said to the person planting the tree, why are you planting the tree? It takes 70 years for the tree to grow. You'll never see the benefits of that tree. And the person said, I'm not planting it for me, I'm planting it for the people who come after me. A carob tree is so strong that it sustains not necessarily this generation, but future generations. So during the day, they study, they cover themselves in the sand to keep warm. They have the carob tree to give them sustenance. They pray, and they're there for 12 years. Why 12? What does 12 symbolize in Jewish tradition? What's that?
The tribes.
Yes, the 12 tribes. The 12 tribes of Jacob. Right? What does that mean, the 12 tribes of Jacob?
The future of Judaism.
Yes, it was the future. It's Bnei Israel. It's all of our people coming together into one people. 12 individual children who all are the children of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. What else does 12 symbolize? Some say that it has to do with wholeness, with completeness. To be a people meant that all 12 had to be together. And that when we were exiled from Jerusalem, all 12 tribes were scattered. We were all sent out. And so this was a way of perhaps trying to create some sense of unity, bringing us all back together. So in this cave, they're stand up to their necks, studying all day, and they're there for 12 years. And then who comes but Eliyahu Hanavi? Do you know the song? Eliyahu Tishbi. Elijah comes, and he stood at the entrance to the cave, and he says, who is going to tell Shimon Bar Yochai that the emperor has died and that the decree has been annulled? Elijah. Who's Elijah? It's a good song. Who's Elijah? Where do we have Elijah in Jewish tradition?
Did they turn that on?
I think it's going to turn off in a second. Who's Elijah? What's the answer? Yes, Elijah comes at Passover. Remember that moment at Passover in our Seder? We all go and we open the door for Elijah, and we hope that Elijah will come. And sometimes it's my little brother who ran around to the front door and he scared us because we didn't know that he was going to be there. It's Elijah. And what's Elijah going to tell us? Yes, that the Messiah is going to come. It's going to be a good thing. And what do we make sure that Elijah has when he comes to visit our house? Lots and lots of Manischewitz. Because we know that Elijah is thirsty, and the first thing that he would want to drink is lots and lots of Manischewitz. I don't know where on earth we got that idea. Where else do we have Elijah in Jewish tradition? Elijah comes at a bris when a baby is born, hoping that maybe this child in entering the covenant might be the messianic figure. Elijah also comes on Saturday nights at the end of Shabbat. What's that ritual called that we do? Havdalah, right? We invite Elijah to hopefully usher in the world of redemption in the week ahead. So Elijah wants to give a message. Today, Elijah would have sent a text message, right? But in the end, he has to actually go find Shimon bar Yochai and tell him that the decree against him had been annulled because the emperor had died. Which meant what? He was free. He could leave quarantine. He could come out and take off his mask and everything would be better. Right? Sounds good to me. Let's see what happens when they come out of the cave. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said they came out of the cave and they saw that people were plowing and were sowing. They were farming. Very common in the ancient world for people to farm. So they come out and they see that people were farming. And Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said, these people abandon eternal life. I'm on the bottom of the second page, the last paragraph. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said, these people abandon eternal life of Torah study, and they engage in temporal life for their own sustenance. They've given up study. Look what we did for 12 years in the cave. We come out, and what are they doing? They're farming. Not the right answer. So the Talmud tells us that every place that Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Elazar directed their eyes was immediately set on fire. If any of you remember the days of Superman, imagine the X-ray vision. He would look, that red light would come out of his eyes and everything would go up in flames. So Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and Rabbi Elazar apparently had Superman-like powers, and every place that they looked immediately went up in flames. A divine voice emerged and said to them, I'm on the top of the third page, did you emerge from the cave to destroy my world? What are you doing? Get back in the cave. Okay, let's try to understand what's happening here. Shimon bar Yochai, Rabbi Elazar, 12 years inside of a cave. They come outside of the cave. The first thing they notice is that people are not doing what they're doing. They studied. These people are farming. They don't like it, and so they set the world on fire. Why did they do that? Why did Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and Rabbi Elazar want to burn the world down? Because the people were not doing what they thought they should be doing.
Sounds like a politician.
Sounds like a politician. Sounds like a group of people, I'm not suggesting in this room, who see people who are not getting a vaccine. Why aren't you getting a vaccine? You should get a vaccine, it'll make me safe. We're not wearing a mask. You should wear a mask because it'll make me safe. No, I don't want to wear a mask because that's my choice, it's my freedom. They're fighting with each other because they don't believe that what you're doing is what you should be doing. You should be doing what I'm doing. Has anyone felt this at all since yesterday? In the last couple of years? We don't agree with each other, and all we want to do is we want to see each other through the lens of burning the other one down. It's a tragic story. But my question is, who was right and who was wrong? Was Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar right because the people weren't studying? Or were the people right because they were taking care of the earth?
Well, if they didn't take care of the earth, there would be no studying.
Great. If you don't take care of the earth, then there would be no study. However, if you don't study, you won't know what to do. Why do you think they were told to go back in the cave?
Go to the corner and think about what you've done.
Yes. Go back inside and think about what you've done. I remember, some of you may remember this, after the first wave of COVID, when we were all sequestered inside, we were quarantined for 3.5 to 4 months, some of you for longer. We had all of this time to think about the world in different ways. What relationships we wanted to capitalize on, how we wanted to take care of ourselves, going for walks, learning how to spend time differently. Anyone remember when we would wipe down all of our produce when we got it delivered? We would wipe it down with like wipes and things like that. People would go for walks, they'd spend time with their families. We reimagined our lives, and then when we started to slowly emerge, it felt uncomfortable. We weren't sure how to adapt. We weren't sure what felt safe. Some people were ready to come out immediately, and others needed to stay in for longer. It was really hard. It's challenging to figure out how to come out, to emerge. And sometimes you have to come back and go back inside the cave before you can come back out again. That's happened with Delta and with Omicron and probably with whatever the next one is. Rabbi Elazar and Shimon Bar Yochai were not prepared to greet the world that they encountered when they left the cave. I'm on the third page, the first full paragraph. So they went in back into the cave and they sat there for 12 months, 1 more year. And they said the judgment of the wicked in Gehenna lasts for 12 months. There's this idea, we don't believe in hell in Jewish tradition, but we believe that maybe from the time of death through the first year, the first Yortzeit, that first anniversary of death, is a moment when our souls can do some work of repentance, of tshuva. Wicked people need a little extra time. How many months, typically, when we say the mourner's Kaddish after someone dies, how many months do we typically say the mourner's Kaddish for? 11 months. And then we take a break, and then we say Kaddish again on the first Yortzeit, on the first anniversary. How long do we say Kaddish for wicked people? 12 months. We give them a little extra bonus. Make sure that they really repent. They stay in there for 1 full year because the judgment of the wicked in Gehenna lasts for 12 months. Who's the wicked here? Is it the people outside, or is it the 2 of them on the inside? Why is it the people outside? Because they're not studying Torah. Shame on them. Why might it be the 2 of them on the inside? What did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Elazar do when they went out into God's world?
Tried to destroy
They destroyed it. God said back into the cave. So maybe they're the wicked ones. Because they weren't able to go out into the world and greet it anew. A divine voice emerged and said to them, emerge from your cave. So they emerged, and everywhere that Rabbi Elazar would strike, Rabbi Shimon would heal. Elazar came back out and he was still had his eyes burning to destroy the world. But this time, as soon as Elazar set the world on fire, Rabbi Shimon stopped it. He did that other Superman thing where he blows the cold air and then he was able to extinguish the flames. Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Elazar, my son, you and I suffice for the entire world. As the 2 of us are engaged in proper study. Because of what we know, we can go out and share our Torah with the rest of the world. Though you can probably read this as saying, you know what, we're better than them. But we don't have to destroy them. One more part. As the sun was setting on Shabbat Eve, I'm in the middle of the 3rd page, they saw an elderly person who was holding 2 bundles of myrtle branches and running at twilight. So this is Friday evening, just before Shabbat. And they said to him, this is Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, father's son, why do you have these? And he said, in honor of Shabbat. So they said to him, and let one suffice. Why do you need to have 2 myrtles? He answered them, one is corresponding to remember the Sabbath day, the text from Exodus, from the Ten Commandments, round 1, about remembering Shabbat. And one is from the second set of the Ten Commandments in Deuteronomy, Shamor, observe Shabbat. Rabbi Shimon said to his son, see how beloved the mitzvot are to Israel. Their minds were put at ease, and they no longer were upset because the people had not engaged in Torah. They came out and they saw that people were observing Shabbat. And not only were they observing Shabbat, they knew about the commandment to remember Shabbat and to keep Shabbat. So what did Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai learn when they came out of the cave the second time?
Shabbat.
Maybe the people were not just working the fields, but maybe every 6 days after working the field, what did they do? They rested. While it may not have been obvious the first time, maybe in fact they were connected to their faith, to their tradition. They were keeping Shabbat. And not only were they keeping it on one level, they may have actually been keeping it on a higher level. What else did they learn the second time when they came out of the cave?
Understanding of others.
Yes, understanding of others. Don't be so quick to burn the world down. Instead, ask, talk to people, be in relationship with people, find out what they're doing. As opposed to, nope, don't like you, I'm going to cast you aside. Okay, there's more to the story, but I'm going to pause for a moment. What is this story about?
Observing Judaism.
It's about observing Judaism. Say a bit more.
Well, Shabbat is important.
Great, Shabbat is important, observing Judaism is important. What else is the story about?
You don't destroy things.
Yes, just because the world is hard and it's broken doesn't mean that you should be an active contributor to the destruction of the world. Great, yeah, please.
Respecting other people.
Yes, respect other people. Halavai, we should just do that simple thing, respect other people. What else do we learn from this story? I want to argue that there's at least 3 lessons from this story. And some of them have already been said. The first is, don't rush to judgment. When you go out into the world and you see people, see if you can actually see them for who they are and understand what they're doing, being careful about how we interpret their actions. The second lesson that I learned is that sometimes we're not ready to emerge from the cave yet. We have to go back into the cave. We haven't quite figured it out. And the third lesson is give people the benefit of the doubt. These were 3 takeaways that I was thinking a lot about right now as we are slowly emerging from the most recent wave of COVID, from Omicron. And we're about to emerge again. We're starting to hear that people are dropping the mask mandates. People are changing their behaviors. We want to get back to normal. God knows the world has burned down time and time again over the last couple of years and beyond. But we have to be careful that when we emerge, that we find some place within ourselves to not rush to judgment about other people. That we give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe there is also goodness in them, even if we have differing points of view. So what do you think of the story? Is it a story of the ancient times or a story of today?
Today.
Both. That's a very Jewish answer. Yes, both. It could be very much both. What else did you think of the story? Can any of you see yourself in the story? If you were to put yourself in the story, which part of the story would you be in? Which character would you play? Would you be the person who's trying to praise everything around, being quiet, or being critical? Who's the critical one in the group? No critics? Oh, I like this group. All right, I appreciate your honesty. Why are you the critic?
because sometimes you're seeking roles, you never, as a person, you should criticize.
Great, right? Sometimes it's worth criticizing because if we criticize, we can actually make them better, right? We can improve upon them. Who here's the quiet one? Oh, you're a critic also?
Now referring to, we all have to be honest, more honest to give you an answer.
Yes, we would all have to be more honest. I appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone here a quiet person? You just like to observe and take it all in? Yeah? You're more like that? Who's the person who's the one who likes to praise everything? Find the good in everything. The eternal optimist. Yeah? How come? It's the rabbi in you, huh? Anyone here? Yeah?
However, negative toward women. So how can we feel very positive about this story?
Great. How can we be critical from the place of learning to reimagine the relationships we have with different kinds of people, right? Of different genders. Absolutely. Maybe there's a lesson here that we should rethink those relationships, even thousands of years later. Anyone else see themselves in the story? I found myself in the story in multiple moments, but also not just across the whole story, but in any given moment of time. That there could be moments where I am both praising and critical and silent, all within a very small window of opportunity. Or that I'm emerging, I think I'm in a good place, and as soon as I come out, I immediately snap, I react, I have to take a step back. That these are not just emotions or experiences that happen over a long period of time, but they can also happen in a very short window. And how challenging it is to be able to figure out how to react or respond to others, let alone myself, in any of those moments. There are times where I also am like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Elazar, and I look at the world with daggers ready to burn it down. And I also need to take a step back and re-enter the world. There's one other thing that I'll leave you with. At the very beginning of the story, and at the end of the story, which we did not read, there is a word that comes up on several occasions, and it's the word tikkun. On several occasions in the beginning, it talks about tikkun, that they established or they fixed or they created all of these different beautiful things in the city, the bathhouses and the marketplaces and the bridges, all of the whatnot. And at the end of the story, it talks about the need to find ways to do more tikkun. When we think of the word tikkun, what's the phrase you often think about? Tikkun olam, healing the world or repairing the world or finding some ways to navigate the brokenness that exists. But the story reminds me that tikkun is not only in the physical structures that we create, but also within ourselves. Right? It's not just about trying to champion a particular issue of justice or make the world a better place, but it's also about doing a certain level of self-tikkun, of helping ourselves interact with one another in a different way. Anyone here learn a good lesson over the last 2 years? What's a lesson you've learned over the last 2 years of COVID?
Oh, keep your mask on.
Keep your mask on, yes. Especially inside, for now. Any other lessons?
Sure.
What?
Avoid crowds.
Avoid crowds, or maybe think about how you engage with groups of people differently. Right? Maybe smaller crowds. I'd say there's a nice crowd.
Well,
Thanks for coming. Anyone else learn a lesson in the last 2 years? Rabbis?
at our age, we've learned most of our lessons.
Oh, is that true?
That's what I think.
Okay,
I learned a very important lesson.
please.
I'm glad I'm retired.
You're glad you're retired. Yes, I want to think about that one a lot too. There was a moment early on in the pandemic, in the first few months, which will, again, that 2-year anniversary coming up next month, which I thought about yesterday on Purim Katan and Mini Purim. that I used to go for walks when the world had shut down. And most of the time when we were walking, it was that one place that we could be without our mask on. And I remember just really enjoying being outside. But for a moment, every time I saw another person, there was always a smile and a wave and a greeting. Like we all somehow understood each other in that moment. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't about, this policy or that. But we all just kind of understood that we were human, that we were God's creatures, that we were in this together, and that there was something beautiful about just genuine human decency and kindness, of greeting each other with a smile, of being able to hope and assume that there was good in every person. That's a lesson I'm trying to hold on to and take with me as we emerge from the cave again, even if I know full well that I might have to go back inside in the future. But something that I hope I'll hold on to when we're all ready to emerge one more time. Great to be with you all. Thank you for having me.